And now, speaking of the upcoming Bahraini-U.S. conference in Manama, aside from the Israel-Palestine peace initiative, a large portion of the summit will be focused on Iran's developing nuclear program. And here to discuss potential responses to the Ayatollah regime's aggressions, we have Colonel in the Reserves Olivier Rafowicz, a senior security and military analyst, and Dr. Martin Sherman, the founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. Thank you both very much for coming in today. Now, Colonel, I'll actually start with you. What do you make of the current situation with Iran in the Middle East ahead of the conference in Bahrain, and how do you think the Middle East is going to go from here?
It's a $1 million question. I mean, we don't know what's going on now, but what is clear that Iran is a big threat, not only to Israel or to the Americans, but also to the Saudis and to the Sunnite Arab countries all over. Now, the issue is, what is the option for the Americans? Do they want to put big pressure on Iran to make the regime change? Or do they are ready to make something like a military option in order to do something on a military point of view? For the time being, it seems that the Americans are preparing a massive military option, but they are still preserving the possibility of, I would say, diplomatic or political compromise. But everything is on the table. The issue is, concerning your question, the possibility of a big mistake, which will not be actually planned, not by the American, neither by the other side.
Law of unintended consequences.
For example. And here, I mean, we are in a very sensitive timing right now because we are getting closer to this possible mistake. And like my friend here is just mentioning, the mistake can also be done on purpose.
Well, and so how active should, or do you believe Israel will be? Like, how involved do you think Israel would be in any sort of operation against Iran in this respect? Or do you think that the United States will mostly use Israel kind of as a base of operations?
The Americans are big enough and strong enough to do what they want to do by themselves. Of course, there is, as usual, intelligence and a personal coordination between the American and the Israeli government, as usual, in order to make things, I would say, known by both sides in case that there is something more serious. But for the time being, it is not, right now, an Israeli-specific issue. It is an American-Iranian issue with other countries involved, and Israel is one of them, but not the leading one.
Okay.
Well, let me start off by saying this is a great improvement on the previous administration of Obama, who basically set the clock back many years with this very ill-advised agreement of 2015. On the other hand, it's very easy to fall prey to jingoistic rhetoric because a military operation against Iran is no joke. I don't think anyone really expected Iran to keep the deal. I think it was just a cover. I think everyone expected Iran one way or the other. And no one will even know if Iran kept the deal because there are secret annexes with the Atomic Energy Agency and the military sites are off limits. So no one really knows if Iran was ever going to keep the agreement. The other thing is, as I said before, several times in the studio, I don't believe that there's going to be a consensual agreement with Iran, only a coercive one. And the question is, will it be coercive with kinetic force or coercive only with threatened kinetic force? And I think the correct formula is biting sanctions backed up by a credible military threat and a long-term objective of regime change. Because the only way to stop or slow down the nuclear program is by a credible military threat backed up by sanctions. And the only way to ensure that it doesn't renew is by regime change.
Well, do you think that, perhaps with all of Iran's current activity near the Straits of Hormuz and in the Gulf of Oman, do you believe that they're maybe forcing a military response?
Well, I don't know. This may be empty bravado. That's nothing really serious has come about. And when you compare the national power of the United States and that of Iran, it's really no contest. It's, if I remember correctly, The GDP is 40 times larger in favor of the United States, 10 times GDP per capita, 6 times the area, 4 times the population, many times military budget. And you know, the ability of the United States to project military force is great. The question is of resolve. I mean, the United States has shown in Serbia, in Afghanistan, and in Iraq that it can bring down any regime with air power and special forces. Bringing down the regime is one thing. Bringing about a successor regime is a completely different science. But I think as opposed to the other countries like Afghanistan and Iraq, where the successor regime wasn't all that successful, I think in Iran there is still a skeletal structure of civil society that can produce a more amenable alternative regime.
By blocking Hormuz, the Iranians are also pushing the Europeans to do something, because the Europeans are not moving because of the nuclear deal. They're moving because of the economy and because of the oil. If oil is blocked from Iran, Hormuz area, to Europe, the European will back the American against Iran. So there is like two different schools to deal with Iran. The Americans are dealing with Iran because of the nuclear agreement, which is a very bad agreement, and the Europeans will move in case that the economy will be hit because of oil blocked in Hormuz. So altogether, the Iranians are in a very bad position right now, and I think that there is a possibility of war. Now, when you talk about war, it's like a forbidden word. But we are now very close to that because, like you just mentioned, the American armada is very big in the area. One of the biggest just after the Iraqi campaign years ago. But right now, what is just appearing to everybody is the American armada. The Brits are now moving forces, special forces, but also other forces. And maybe tomorrow, after tomorrow, the Europeans will also move forces, not because of the nuclear agreement, but because of the problem of the economy in case that oil will be blocked in the area. So altogether, the Iranians now have to choose. Do they want to make things change, economically speaking and diplomatically speaking, or they stand where they stand with the Khamenei position and they go to war, or at least to a major conflict?
Well, you must remember that the Iranians are not immune to pressure, military and otherwise. We saw, I think in 2003 it was, when the Americans moved their forces into Iraq, the Iranians basically shut down their project. And until they realized that there wasn't going to be any action against them, and they restarted it. But the specter of American military might close on their borders had an impact on them.
Also, Donald Trump also is very close to the next elections, and maybe he has to show. Not because he wants to show something good, but because he wants to show that he's very serious.
Project strength, sure.
And it will be maybe the first major campaign with a very catastrophic potential. But I mean, the major campaign that he can launch against Iran with a quite big consensus all over the world.
All right, Colonel Rafowicz, Dr. Sherman, thank you both very much for coming in.
Thank you.